So the mission's clear. Redesign the family tent. OWEA gives the project an identity. But before I start designing, I need to understand what's actually broken. Let's get into episode 2. Most family tents are sold as places to sleep. But when a family actually does go camping, sleeping's really only one part of that whole experience. Most of the time it's spent around like the entrance or under the awning. Cooking food, sitting, playing games, helping kids get organised, and trying to stop everything turn into a bit of chaos. So before I start sketching solutions, I want to understand what is the real problem. The more I think about family camping, the more obvious it becomes that a tent is not really just a sleeping structure. Yeah, the bedrooms matter. They need to be comfortable, private and dry, but most of the actual camping experience happens outside these sleeping rooms. It happens in the living room, around the awning, around the kitchen, around the table, outside, around the messy bit where shoes, towels, rain jackets, food, bags, and people all collide. So maybe the starting point for a better family tent is not how many people can it sleep. Maybe the better question is, how well does it help a family live? Identifying pain points is really about looking for the moments where a product doesn't quite work for the people using it. It's not just making a list of complaints, it's a design discovery tool. So each frustration is a clue. When something is awkward, slow, messy, annoying, or just badly suited to real life, there's usually an opportunity hidden inside it. So for OWEA project, I'm using pain points to understand how families actually camp. Not our tents are shown in catalogues, all perfectly pitched on dry grass, with 2 chairs out the front, but really how they're used. Wet shoes at the door, bags spilling into sleeping areas, kids moving in and out, cooking gear taking over the awning, chairs, towels, raincoats, half the car somehow migrating into the tent. By mapping those frustrations, I can start to see some patterns. Where does the mess build up? Where does the rain get in? Where does movement become awkward? Where does the tent stop supporting the way people actually live outdoors? And once those patterns become clear, the pain points stop becoming problems on a list and become prompts for design. They help define what the tent needs to be better, where the opportunities are, and what kind of solution is actually worth designing. Because the goal isn't to make a different looking family tent, it's to design one around the realities of family camping. And so I've got 5 pain points here that I've sort of targeting as, I guess, directions for me to explore. And I'll break each of those down into, specific problems within each pain point as we progress through. Let's take a look at pain point 1. No proper sheltered entrance. So a lot of family tents have large doors, but they're not always properly protecting the transition zone. So when it's raining, the moment you open the door, you're exposing the inside of the tent. You're trying to take off your wet shoes, trying to get kids ready and get them inside. You're unzipping doors, holding towels, you're managing jackets, and somehow you've got to try and keep the dry zone dry. So that transition from outside to inside really feels underdesigned. Pain point 2, rua. Gear's got nowhere to go. And if you're anything like me, camping starts with a very sensible plan. Prepare for the worst. So even if the forecast says fine, sunny, beautiful, I'll still pack for rain, hail, sleet, wind, mud, sudden temperature drops, and possibly a small emergency. The problem is all that gear has got to go somewhere. And in a family tent, space starts getting quietly relocated. The cooking area becomes a changing area. The changing area becomes a games area. The games area becomes a bag storage area. and before long the whole tent is operating like a badly run airport terminal. Part of the issue is that most tents don't really give you many cues for how the space should be organised. Gear doesn't have a clear home, so it just finds one. Usually right where you need to walk, sit, sleep, or make a cup of coffee. Then you add wet gear into the mix. You've got wet shoes, you've got a wet jacket, you've got towels, damp clothes, bags that have been sitting on the grass. None of it belongs in the dry zones. But in the most tents, there isn't really anywhere else for it to go. So it comes inside because, of course, it needs to. You can't stay out and get wet. And suddenly storage isn't about convenience. It affects how the whole tent feels. A well-organised tent feels calm. A badly organised tent feels like you're camping inside a laundry basket. So this pain point is really about asking, where should the gear live? How should storage be designed? And how can the tent help families stay organised rather than leaving them to constantly improvise? When you look across the family tent market, there are lots of very capable products. Some are incredibly well made, and many solve specific problems really well. But the basic structure often feels similar. Bedrooms come first, then an awning or living area is added around them. Now that's not necessarily wrong, but if families spend most of their waking time in the living zone, then maybe that space deserves to be the main design driver. This is the point where I'm not trying to criticise what already exists. I'm trying to understand what might still be unresolved in tents. Big volume, big wind load. So the other big issue is wind. As family tents get larger, they naturally create more surface area, more height, more fabric, bigger panels, more awning. That gives us useful space, sure, but it also turns a tent into a sail. So the challenge is not just making the tent bigger, it's creating useful living volume without making the structure feel vulnerable when the weather does change. Pack down is another part of the experience that often gets ignored. A tent might look great when it's fully set up, but if it's hard to pack away, especially when wet, tired, windy, or the kids are just wanting to get going, that becomes part of the product experience. The design needs to consider the full journey: arrival, setup, living, weather, storage, and pack down. To understand the design opportunity, I needed to map out the whole camping system, not just the tent itself. Because I need to look at and consider the car, the kitchen, the chairs, the sleeping rooms, the entrance, the wet gear, the kids area, the food storage, the drying space, and the constant movement between all of these. And this is where family camping is different from lightweight hiking or solo camping. Family camping's almost more domestic, more social, more repetitive, but it can also be more chaotic. So we're not just sheltering people overnight, we're actually creating a temporary family home for them. So from all of this, what do we understand? Well, we've got a bunch of opportunity areas that we can start to explore. We have a better sheltered entrance, a more useful transition zone, somewhere for wet gear to live, a living space that feels intentional rather than leftover. And I think there might be an opportunity to rethink the relationship between the tent, the car, the camp kitchen, and the outdoor seating area. And finally, I think there's definitely opportunity to think about wind, pack down, and everyday living for a family from the beginning, rather than treating them as afterthoughts. So to pull all of this together, the question I'm taking forward is this: what would a family tent look like if it was designed around living first rather than sleeping first? Not ignoring the bedrooms, of course, but not letting them dominate the whole design. What happens if the entry, the awning, the storage and the weather protection, or the kitchen relationship and the family routines become the foundation of the concept? That's what I want to explore next.